Welcome to ARVN, Amateur Radio Video News. The program you're about to see is free to watch, courtesy of YouTube. Thanks, YouTube. But it wasn't free to make. ARVN's got a lot of money invested in video equipment like this sweet camera and that editing system back there. And it takes a lot of time to shoot and edit a program like this. So I'm asking you to make a voluntary payment, contribution, whatever you want to call it. Just stop by our website, arvn.tv, and you'll see a link to make that payment, whatever you think the program is worth to you. I guess you could say that this program is brought to you by you. So thanks for watching and enjoy the show.
I have to say first, I've never seen such a collection of Part 15 devices up here in all my life. Welcome to the FCC Forum. I very much appreciate you all taking time out from the Hamvention this afternoon to come. It's a pleasure to be back here again for us. My name is William Cross. I work in the Mobility Division of the FCC's Wireless Telecommunications Bureau in Washington, D.C. The Mobility Division is the office in the FCC that is responsible for oversight of the amateur service. On the air, I'm W3TN. Also with me today is the Commission's Special Counsel for Amateur Radio Enforcement, Laura Smith. Laura will be talking about some of our enforcement activities a little bit later. Before we get going, I want to offer a special thanks to Hamvention and the Dayton Amateur Radio Association for making it possible for Laura and me to conduct this forum. In the Mobility Division, we handle the day-to-day administration of the amateur service and some of the rulemaking activities that affect amateur radio. The division also has staff members in our Gettysburg, Pennsylvania office. Our Gettysburg staff handles most of your applications and the licensing matters and deals with the Universal Licensing System, or ULS, which is not named the unbelievably lousy system, as some of you think it is. To dispel any notion that at heart I'm really any different than any of you, is anyone from the K5D DXpedition here? Anyone? Cowards. I was hoping I could get a QSL card from them. This year, I want to do the forum differently than in past years. What I'm going to do is offer some general comments and observations about where the Commission is and its priorities, and talk about a couple of topics that keep coming up in questions we receive in articles that appear on websites and in columns in newsletters and the like. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about Commission decisions that have been issued, because most of these have been reported on the ARRL or other websites. Those decisions have generally involved vanity call signs, and you've seen the letters that go out where people apply a day early, send us a letter and say, please give me the call sign anyway. And we send them back a letter that says, gee, you applied a day early and it's been assigned to someone else. Or petitions that one fellow sent in and said, we ought to go back to the old rule that requires posting of licenses. You know, we looked back and saw that rule was changed many years ago, and there wasn't really a reason to change it again. Another petition was asking about suppression of addresses in the database. Again, it's been considered many times, and those petitions were all denied. For the most part, topics that have been released, the petitions and letters and things like that are pretty boring stuff, and we have something of much greater interest to you. We have a new staff member for you to meet, and she is Laura. In January, she took the position Riley had had for the past many years. I've been asked a lot of questions from people about, have we heard from Riley? How's he doing? What's going on? And I have heard from him since he retired. I had the impression that retirement was going really well for him, but now I'm not so sure. One email said something about all the DX on the air. Well, you know, that sounded pretty encouraging. I was finally hearing words I wanted to hear. Then there was another email with a question about whether he should get an amplifier or 260 feet of hardline. Well, that was easy to answer. You'd get both. I also thought success had been achieved when that question came. 260 feet of hardline. Okay, 30 feet through the house, 30 feet out to the tower, and 200 feet straight up. That sounded pretty reasonable. But then I found out that what he was thinking about was 230 feet across the backyard and 30 feet up. So I've still got some work to do there. The real question mark, though, was this email. Things are fine here. Busy, but more flexibility to do stuff. I went to college for years, so I wouldn't have to grow my own damn food. Now my wife has me putting in a gazillion square foot garden. If you see Riley, please ask him how retirement's going. Now, as you all know, we had an election last November, and with the election came a change of political parties in the White House and also changes in Congress. The statute that creates the commission allows us to have 5 commissioners. We have 3 commissioners that are sitting commissioners now. Commissioner Copps is the acting chairman of the commission, and he sets the priorities for the commission. He said that the 3 highest priorities for the commission are digital television transition, DTV transition, and digital television transition. And that is the way it will be until mid-June. And we have currently staff members from every bureau, all of the field agents, and anyone else they could volunteer, convince, or otherwise missed the meeting, now traveling around the country, making sure that people are aware of DTV transition, getting their coupons, finding out what they need to do, so that come the middle of June, when the final cutover to digital television occurs, television reception will continue throughout the country. The other 2 commissioners we have are Commissioner Edelstein, who has been nominated to be the head of the Rural Utility Service in the Department of Agriculture, and Commissioner McDowell. From what I have heard and from what I have read, the relationships between the commissioners are very collegial. Everyone is getting on well, and we have been releasing a lot of items now that Commissioner Copps is our acting chairman. You've also read that there have been nominations of 2 more commissioners, or nominations of 2 individuals for commissioners. Julius Janikowski is one, and Mignon Claiborne is the other. The last I read last week was that their confirmation hearings would be held after Memorial Day. And beyond that, we really don't know what's planned. So maybe by the end of the summer, sometime during the summer, the commission will be back up to its complement of 5 commissioners, and we will have a new chairman too. The first topic I want to mention is RACES. We have been getting questions about rejuvenating RACES and how we, the FCC, are going to do that. The questions have been from a couple of FEMA guys who also happen to be hams. Now, in RACES, stations are certified by a civil defense organization, and persons who hold an FCC-issued amateur operator license are certified by that civil defense organization as enrolled in it. I know that the term civil defense organization is way out of date. Emergency management agencies are probably a better term or a more current term. But the terminology used in the rules reflects that RACES was created in the Cold War era when there was a concern that everyone would be ordered off the air. As it is now, RACES seems to be used for local, state, and regional events, and it is administered by FEMA. The rules require that communications transmitted in RACES be approved by the organization that certified people and that they're enrolled with. Fundamentally, RACES is there to serve whatever purpose the emergency management agency has for it. Because the Emergency Management Agency decides whether it has a use for a RACES group, the rejuvenation, if it is even necessary, will have to come from the local or state organizations. They will have to get people interested in joining their groups if they have a use for them. The FCC can't tell anyone that they must or that they can't take part in a RACES group. I can tell you that we haven't received any requests to change the rules that apply to RACES, and that's probably a good thing. Some of the people that I have talked to in different government agencies wonder why we still have this service, given the way that emergency communications is run and managed today. The second topic that has been coming up a lot is business use of amateur radio, specifically transmitting messages on behalf of an employer. Section 97.113 answers this question straight on. No amateur station shall transmit communications for hire or for material compensation, direct or indirect, paid or promised, except as otherwise provided in these rules. There are two exceptions there. They are exceptions for teachers who are using amateur radio, the control operator of a station in an educational institution as part of a classroom thing, and control operators of club stations in certain cases. A station is also not allowed to transmit communications in which the station licensee or control operator has a pecuniary interest, including communications on behalf of an employer. There is an exception in that rule that allows you to transmit communications that are commonly referred to as swap nets, but eBay seems to have reduced the need for these nets. And you're not allowed to transmit communications on a regular basis which could reasonably be furnished through other radio services. Section 97.113 is there for two reasons. It meets a statutory requirement, and it is there to protect your frequencies from becoming the Business Radio Alternative Voice Overflow, or BRAVO service. Because your spectrum is so valuable, if you let users such as businesses, TV stations, the National Weather Service, or other users, be they for-profit or non-profit, use your frequencies to meet their communications needs, your frequencies will become their frequencies. All it takes is an allocation proceeding at the FCC and your spectrum is gone. And you will be left whining about it in internet chat rooms. The basis for the rule is the international radio regulations. The radio regulations define the amateur service as a radio communication service for the purpose of self-training, intercommunications, and technical investigations carried out by amateurs. Amateurs are defined as duly authorized persons interested in radio techniques solely with a personal aim and without pecuniary interest. If you lose or give away the solely with a personal aim and without pecuniary interest, you lose any right to frequencies in the radio spectrum. The rule is there to protect your frequencies from other services. Now, Dave Sumner had an editorial on this April 1st, 2009. That's probably not the best day to date something, but you should read it. And I have plagiarized from that greatly because it is very elegant and spot on. The bottom line is that when any of us are on the air as amateurs in the ham bands, we are not pursuing financial gain for ourselves or our employers. The no pecuniary principle has been reflected in the FCC regulations since 1928. It distinguishes us from commercial services. In 1993, the Commission, at your request, dropped the no business communications language and simply prohibited communications on behalf of an amateur's employer or in which the amateur has a pecuniary interest. The Commission stated that any amateur-to-amateur communications is permitted unless specifically prohibited or unless transmitted for compensation, or done for the pecuniary benefit of the station control operator or his or her employer. This rule applies to communications. It does not matter what type of technology, whether it's single sideband, whether it's digital, slow scan TV, or CW, is used to transmit that communications. It boils down to a simple four-part test that you, as the control operator of the station, must ask yourself before you cause the station to transmit a message. 1, is the communications expressly prohibited in the rules? For instance, is it music? Is it obscenity? Something like that. 2, is the communications transmitted for compensation? Whether it's paid or compensation in some other way, such as if you get this message to a friend of mine that's on a sailboat in the middle of nowhere, I'll pay your light bill. Or get this message to, someplace and I'll buy you a new radio. That's indirect compensation. Does the control operator have a pecuniary interest in the communications? That is, could he or she benefit financially? Stock trades on ham radio benefit you financially. And does the control operator's employer have an interest in the communications? If the answer to each of these questions is no, then the communications is acceptable, with the caveat that it is not on a regular basis one which could be furnished alternatively through other radio services. The problem with communications on behalf of employers recently seems to revolve around what some licensees consider public service communications. As Dave said, and he is absolutely correct, we can never have enough trained and disciplined amateur operators willing to provide public service communications in times of need. That said, there are limits to what an amateur can do on behalf of his or her employer. There are also limits on the extent to which amateur radio can be used for the purpose for which other radio services were created. No communications on behalf of an employer means just that. There's no exception for the 15 minutes you're on break. There's no exception for, gee, it's the weekend. Or there's no exception because you want to do it. If it's your employer, you cannot transmit communications on their behalf. That is a commercial communications. The last topic I want to address is public service communications. There's no rule about public service communications as such in Part 97 because most of the messages you transmit that you think of as public service communications are allowed by Section 97-111. Paragraph A authorizes an amateur station to transmit two-way communications, including, among other things, exchanging messages with other stations in the amateur service, and communications necessary to meet essential communications needs and to facilitate relief actions. Note that most of these transmissions, the essential communications needs and facilitating relief actions, will be two-way exchanges of messages with other amateur stations. The rule also authorizes you to transmit one-way communications, such as transmissions necessary to make adjustments to the stations. These are your tests, your tones, tossing the carrier to see what the SWR is, that kind of thing. And brief transmissions necessary to establishing two-way communications with other stations. So this is CQing as an example of that. These rules that are already there allow you to transmit almost any message imaginable, subject to the restrictions of the four-part test. The rules cover everything we do: rag chewing, DX contests, DXpeditions, county hunting, tuning up. 99% of our communications fall under the rules that are there. Emergency communications, by their nature, involve an element of immediacy. immediate safety of property and life. Reporting where damage is, what happened after a tornado goes through, or where power lines are down, is certainly public service communications, and it's allowed under 97-111. But it may not involve an immediate safety of life and property. A bridge washed out, for example, may need a more immediate response than downed trees, and reporting that is already allowed as just two-way communications between stations. A car with occupants floating down a river is clearly an emergency situation. In cases like that, the rules already provide that at all times and on all frequencies, each control operator must give priority to stations providing emergency communications. I have never heard of a case where a ham station has come on a repeater or a frequency and said, "I have an emergency message," and someone said, "Wait your turn." That's not your style. You all do a really good job of getting the messages through and helping out by being extra eyes and ears to emergency responders. To being the emergency responders and figuring out how to prioritize this information and respond to it is the job of the emergency responders. Now, as I mentioned, I'm not going to spend much time on petitions that are pending, but we do have a couple of them. A fellow from Texas has again filed a petition that deals with the station identification rule. We'll be addressing that sometime in the future. The ARRL also has a petition pending. It's RM 11325 that requests that we amend the rules that apply to the power stations may use when transmitting spread spectrum. It's not a petition as such, but it's a matter that a few of you have a tangential interest in, and that's BPL. As you know, the unredacted documents were released a couple of weeks ago. I think there's a link to them from the ARRL website. That court case is going to result in some other kind of proceeding at the commission to address that. But these have not yet been acted on by the commission. We're also getting a lot of questions about the status of the PRB1 decision that was released in 1985. The status of that is that the last commission decision that came out on that was in 2001. The commission there said the scope of the limited preemption policy remains applicable only to regulations of state, county, municipal, and other local governing bodies, and is not applicable to homeowners association bylaws and architectural control committee regulations. The commission also said, though, that should Congress see fit to enact a statutory directive mandating the expansion of the PRB1 policy, the commission would expeditiously act to fulfill its obligations thereunder. Now, I understand legislation has again been introduced in Congress that would expand the PRB1 decision. It was looking toward requiring a study by DHS as to if there's an impact of private regulations on, like emergency communications and things like that. And I think DHS would have to do a study or something. I'm sure that will be well reported in the press as that moves through. I also understand recently that bill was assigned to the House Commerce Committee, which is the committee that has oversight jurisdiction over the commission. Now, with that, I'm kind of out of things to talk about. I know you have a lot of questions, but before we get to them, we're very fortunate to have with us this year Laura Smith, and she is the special counsel for amateur radio enforcement. Now, Laura works in the Enforcement Bureau. As I said earlier, I work in the Wireless Bureau. We are extremely fortunate that we were able to talk Laura into coming back, and she wanted to, and to take that position. And I mean that sincerely and from a number of different angles, too. I used to work for Laura. Many years ago, she had been the deputy division chief in a former reincarnation of where I now work. And as in that position, she kind of became familiar with the amateur service. She became, at least knowledgeable we existed, who I was, kind of what the rules were. We had a chance to talk about it. Laura is probably, just one of the best people that we possibly could get for this job, because before she came to the Wireless Bureau, she had worked in mass media. After she was in the Wireless Bureau, Laura had been the president of a trade association in Washington. Now, trade associations are very interesting creatures. And in that association, she was able to hone her psychiatric skills, dealing with people that are important, people that wanted to be important, and some people that were sure they would be important in the future. She also dealt with all the management issues of the funding of these organizations, all this kind of stuff that is involved in it. And that organization, fortunately, was a land mobile organization. Those are Part 90 licensees. Many of the issues that come up with other entities using amateur spectrum are entities that are either in mass media services or in land mobile services and are basically lusting after your bands. So we are fortunate now that when someone calls up, Laura has this breadth of knowledge of not only what the amateur stuff is, but where they actually really should belong. And she can counsel them very gently that they need to get licensed here and not, where they think they are. This is something you don't see. Believe it or not, it is a tremendous help to you. Riley has also pitched in here. And after Laura was on board, Riley came back to the commission, helped her go through the files, figure out what's going on, and get her up to speed extremely quickly. So in the couple of months she's been here, an awful lot has happened. Not all you have seen, but an awful lot has happened. Shortly after she came on board, all of our misfits on 14275 called her to introduce themselves. I thought that was really a gracious thing for them to do. And she called me up and said, this is like a bunch of 5-year-olds. I thought, well, okay, okay, well, welcome to the crew. And it was like, well, that's a nice cliche. I found out later that this was an exclamation that came from experience. She's actually used to working with 5-year-olds. So she has a breadth of experience and a breadth of knowledge that is going to serve us very well. And as I found out the other evening, she promised to stay until her daughter graduated from high school. So if you have any ideas about a short timer or think you're going to get away with it, plan on about 15 years down the road. In the meantime, behave yourselves. Now, I'm sure you have a lot of questions about Laura, and I know there's a great deal of interest in what she's been up to over the past few months and what the Commission has been doing on the enforcement front. So if you would, please welcome Laura Smith.
Thank you, and hello there, amateurs. You're supposed to say hello, hi, hey. All right, this is where we get to have a little bit of fun. What I'm going to do to start off with is introduce myself. My name is Laura Smith. I am the new special counsel for amateur enforcement. Please do not ever call me the scare. I do not think that is a great term to use. It's the scare. Yes, I saw that written somewhere and said, no, we're not going to do that. There has been quite a lot of speculation about me, a lot of rumors. You guys, I have to admit, you guys gossip more than a group of 15-year-old girls. I've never seen anything quite like it. So I thought the best way to do this today was to give you a little bit of an introduction to me, who I am and what I'm about. The best way to tell you who I am and what I am about is to tell you a couple of stories. They're not stories about me, by the way. They are stories, however, about the person who has had and still does have the most influence on me in my life. That's my dad. And yes, the internet rumors are true. My father is a retired police officer. He spent 45 years carrying a gun and a badge. And during that time, he did manage to raise 4 children and teach us some values. Now, the best way for you to understand what kinds of values my dad taught us and those values that I'm going to bring to the job is to start out at the beginning of his career. He was a young cop. One day he got a call while he was at the desk. The complainant went through the litany of what had happened. Someone had gone through downtown, shot out all of the streetlights downtown. He took all of the details. They had a very detailed description of who the individual was. He wrote that down, and the complainant, who just so happened to be the mayor of the town, said, "Now, you know what you have to do." He said, "Yes, sir, I do." He got up from his desk, he got in his car, he went for a short drive, he got to a house. He went up, he rang the doorbell. A middle-aged man answered the door. "Well, hello there, how are you today?" "Sir, I need to speak to your son." "You do?" "Yes, sir, I do." "Well, what's this about?" So he handed the middle-aged gentleman the piece of paper. The middle-aged gentleman read the piece of paper. He said, "Do you want to take him with you, or do you want me to bring him down?" He said, "I'll take him with me." The middle-aged gentleman turned around, said, "Bruce, put your shoes on. Your big brother is here to arrest you." That should give you a hint about what my dad was about. It did not matter who you were. If you did the crime, then you had to actually pay the price. Now, to be fair to my uncle, he was 14 years old at the time, and it was a school prank that went awry. Vastly awry. He spent the next 6 months working off that debt. He also ultimately became a judge, so there is some redemption here. That doesn't say much about the system there in Arizona, but I will say he is a fine judge and he's a great guy, so he did manage to grow up. You would think at that time my dad would have learned his lesson and tried to avoid confrontations like that. Unfortunately, let's go several years more into his career so you get a better idea of the man who actually taught me just about everything I know and who I am. He's in Tucson at this time. One evening he gets a call while he's in his car. There's a bar fight. They need someone to go break it up. They need someone big to go break it up. My dad's a big guy. So off he goes. He arrives at the bar fight, walks in the door, and sees the most famous man in America in the middle of a brawl. This man is attempting to pummel as hard as he can all of the people around him. At that point, my father said he had about 4 inches on him and about 30 pounds on him. So he knew that he had to do something to break this up without getting killed in the process, because if this man actually took a swing at him, he was going to annihilate him. So he went over to him and he interjected himself very quickly into the fight, and he said very, very sternly to this man, "Sir, you must stop immediately." This is a bar fight, right? That didn't work. He grabbed him by the arm and he said, "You must listen to me. We can do this the easy way or we can do this the hard way, but we will do this. The easy way, you stop and come with me. The hard way," and at this point he put his hand on his gun and he said, "The hard way is I will use any and every means at my disposal to force you to come with me. If that means putting you on the ground, cuffing you, and perp walking you out of here, I will do so. And while I'm doing it, the bartender will drop the dime on you and call every press person in town, and they will be outside to take your picture. You will come with me." At that point, the man decided, very rightfully so, that he was going to cease and desist and come with the police officer. So out my father took him, and everything was peaceful, so you would think. That night, my dad went home and told the story to my mother. For the next 2 weeks, my father slept on the couch, because that night, my father arrested John Wayne. So as you can see, he's a man who really does hold true to his word. It doesn't matter who you are, what you do for a living. If you break the law, you have to pay the price. Unfortunately for some amateurs, they are now facing that with me. That's the philosophy that I've adopted. I was raised that way. If my old man would arrest not only my uncle, but John Wayne, what can I do? I have to follow through. Putting aside all of the levity here, let's talk about what I've been up to in enforcement in the last couple months. When I arrived in my office, I have to say there was a big change, by the way. When Riley left, those that had the privilege of being in Riley's office knew that it was almost floor-to-ceiling papers. They were everywhere. The office had been emptied out, and everything was now electronic waiting for me. So I got in, and there were approximately 450 emails waiting in the FCC ham mailbox. I spent a couple of weeks sorting through those and ultimately discovered that some of those were repetitive complaints or multiple complainants, and there were about 303 complaints in there all totaled when everything was combined. I was thinking, well, that's not such a bad deal. I can deal with this. So I began compiling the list. During that process, however, the folks down in DC decided to ruin my entire day and send up about 125 more cases that they'd been hoarding down there. So all total, there were about 430 cases in the backlog. What I had to do was sort of categorize them, find out what they were, figure out what was going on, and then come up with some kind of plan of action. During this whole process, however, you all need to understand, when I took this job, it was changed. This job used to be in the Spectrum Enforcement Division down in DC. It was a remote position in a DC office. It is no longer in that division. I am actually a field agent. I am attached to the FCC field offices. I'm in the Northeast region. And my supervisor is the regional director for the Northeast region. So when we moved it, we had to actually move everything, meaning the databases and everything that went with that position. So we have created a new database in the field, and we're trying to populate that database. So on top of taking inventory of all the backlog, I have to, and still am, populating the new database so that we can keep a track of it, because the worst thing you can do is to lose track of what's going on. So after I finished going through all of these, I came up with a list of about 7 or 8 different categories of what the complaints generally fall into. And the list is rather broad, meaning I sort of put big categories, and then there are various scenarios under those categories. But for your purposes, we get a lot of things, complaints dealing with criminal investigations or criminals who have been convicted of crimes. Those are handled on a case-by-case basis. We simply review the facts, and the commission will act on that. That is not me who will act on that. That is actually a separate department at the commission that will ultimately act on what to do with those licenses. We also get technical violations, whether it's failure to identify, 113A, 4, out of band, those type of enforcement complaints come in. Those are relatively easy to deal with. If you have committed a technical violation of the rules, you get either a phone call, an email, or a letter from me that says, don't do that. If you continue to do it, you get something more from the commission that says, we told you not to do that, and you did it. So here's your warning letter. Don't do that again. If you feel that you cannot comply by that, we can certainly accommodate your wishes and raise it up to the next level, and you can get a notice of violation or a notice of apparent liability. And to make our point, we'll take your money. Thank you very much. You can make the checks out to me. It actually doesn't work that way. And the third type of complaint that I get are harassment and language complaints. These are a little bit more difficult, and I'm sure you can all understand why they're more difficult. We're talking about Pete follows me around the air and gets on every time I'm on to interrupt my QSO. Okay. There's not much I can do about that, realistically, unless Pete is maliciously interfering with you, which we're going to get to in a minute. That's a great one. Or language. You all know that you need to not use foul language on air. You're going to do it. I tell you, I've been in restaurants and I've heard language that quite frankly, you have to sort of say, did you really say what I think you said in a restaurant full of people and children? You know, in our society anymore, we've had a lot of influx of these types of conversations and words. So generally speaking, these are very difficult for the commission to enforce, in the sense that if you use it in the routine course of a conversation, you're not going to get a notice of violation from the commission. If you use it as a systemic pattern and you are making sexual references and innuendos in your conversation, you're going to hear from the commission. Don't do it. Try to remember that not only can you hear you, but I get to hear you at some point, and I don't want to hear you when you want to talk like that. I must be the only woman in the United States whose husband says every day as she goes to work, there's my wife, she's going to listen to dirty tapes. Don't do it, because I don't want to hear it. And really, I really don't want to have to close the door. You know, and I close the door of my office when I'm going to listen to him, and everybody around me in the offices around me, they all like hover right outside. They're all like listening to see if they can hear what's going on in there. The other type that I get are the illegal use of call signs. This one is actually, there's virtually nothing I can do unless you know who is doing it. What you do is you tell me that it's happening. It's been happening quite often, by the way. You let me know it's happening, and I'll make a record of it. So if somebody were to break a rule while using your call sign, we do have a record that you've complained to the commission and said, you know, I'm not using it, somebody's pirated my call sign, essentially. If we catch them while doing it, and we do some routine monitoring, and if somebody catches at one of the monitoring stations or a field agent, then we can do something. But other than that, really, unless it's, again, a pattern and they do it regularly, if it's a one-off, there's nothing I can do about it. But thank you for letting me know, and we will make a record. We get a lot of malicious interference complaints. That's actually the bulk of the complaints that I get. Unfortunately, these are a little bit more difficult to handle because malicious interference is a gray area, meaning what is it, what does it mean? And it's based on the facts of the case. So what I have to do is take the information from you and determine, based on those facts, at those circumstances, at that given time, was that malicious interference? And if it was, again, we can do a phone call if I think it's a one-time deal. We can do an email, or we can do some kind of letter. And in each one of these, remember, enforcement is all about facts. And when you give me the facts, then I can go forward and try and work out what we're going to do and how we're going to resolve the problem. The next type of complaint that we get are unlicensed use. I think a lot of you have seen a lot of letters that got posted. I get a lot of people emailing and calling about people who are either CBers operating in the amateur band, or people who are flat out just operating in the amateur band. And so we contact them and either talk to them or write them letters and tell them, don't do it. And again, if you feel that you can't abide by that, we will contact you again with a warning letter that says don't do it. And if you continue to do it, we will again invite you to share some of your money with us, and we'll gladly take it into the U.S. Treasury. The last one that I get, which seems to be on their face the easiest to resolve and yet are ultimately going to be the most troublesome, are the RFI cases. I get two types of RFI complaints. The first type of RFI complaint I get are the ones where your neighbors are complaining about you. You guys are causing interference to their television or to their radios or their telephone. The commission generally tells them if you are a licensed amateur operator operating within the parameters of your license, then the Part 15 device that you are causing interference to is subject to that interference, and the rules state that very clearly. We suggest that they either work with you or they get a filter, and those are the two suggestions. The other type of RFI case, which I currently am working on, approximately 50 with the ARRL lab, are the RFI cases dealing with utility line interference. Now this one is a little bit, technically you would think it's easy to resolve. Power line is causing interference, utility will come out and fix it, everything will be fine. Not quite so easy. Those of you that have been experiencing it for 3, 4, 5, 10, 12 years know that in fact is not what happens. What I am discovering, and we're trying to figure out a way to communicate better to the utilities, is that the utilities quite simply don't know how to fix the problem. They can't identify the noise. What they will do is they will go out and they will find 15 sources of noise. They will fix these 15 sources of noise, and then they will come back to me with this detailed list of these 15 sources of noise that they have fixed. Yay, we're all done. No, they haven't fixed your noise. So they don't quite understand the concept of don't just run out and fix everything you see. That's irrelevant to the amateur. The amateur wants you to fix their noise. First step, go to the amateur's house and listen to the noise so you can determine exactly what they're hearing. So when you fix it, you can ultimately figure out if you have in fact fixed their noise. I'm trying to figure out a way with the lab how we can best tell the utilities that they need to really think about how their processes work, and what we can do to educate them so that they can get out and fix this. What I have done, which is slightly different than Riley, is that I have decided in order to motivate the utilities to better try and resolve these situations, I have given them time limits. What I'm doing is telling them if you go out and you can't fix it, then every 2 weeks you have to report back to me in writing why you can't fix it. Utilities are, generally speaking, publicly traded companies. So what happens is they have a board of directors that they answer to. Those people are not going to want them to waste time and energy writing this crazy woman in Gettysburg every 2 weeks a detailed report. And believe you me, if they miss their deadline, I call them and tell them, you've missed your deadline. I need your report. I have spoken to more heads of utilities in the last 3 weeks than I ever care to speak to again. They have no qualms about calling me and saying we can't meet the deadline, and I've explained to them that's fine. I'll just write up this nice little letter. You can write your check to the federal government. Now, what I have done thus far, though, is try and work systematically through this backlog to get to it. And I would say that in a perfect world, I would be 2/3 of the way through all of this. And in reality, I am 2/3 of the way through the backlog. Unfortunately, and I have to say I do love the amateurs, but unfortunately, you guys like to complain a lot. I get about 20 to 30 emails a day with new cases. So as fast as I'm working through those 400 cases that I had when I got there, I get new cases. The thing that I will tell everyone is if I don't respond to your email immediately, I am not ignoring you. Please do not think that you're not going to get a response. But again, I have to sort of try and work these as I can to get the backlog taken care of, to take care of what is now the new backlog that is building up, and eventually I will get it all done. Going forward, I will just suggest to all of you that we as a collective, you guys and me, we can have a great relationship. We can do this the easy way. You guys can, in fact, follow the rules, and remember that when you signed up to become an amateur, you actually signed and committed to adhere to the Commission's rules. I'm going to strongly suggest that you hold to that. If you don't, we can do this the difficult way. And I am more than willing to do that if it comes down to it, understanding that my preference is that we all just get along, to use a cliched phrase, as a lot of people have used in the past. So with that, I am actually going to stop talking because I prefer this to be a dialogue, and I'm going to let you ask all of your questions of Bill Cross, and he will answer them all gladly.
There is one exception to the statement she made about unauthorized use of call signs. If you hear a station from North Korea, use mine, but let me know the date and time you made the QSO. Same with Scarborough Reef, since I was in Florida that week. Now, I know that a number of you have questions, and to kind of get us started and see what the interest is, how many of you have questions concerning vanity call signs and things that have been revolving around that, or the license processing questions?
I'm Tim McGee, WB2KAO from Rochester, New York. And my question is, as we know, we no longer have an advanced class license. However, the advanced class license holder does have band segments, that they earned with that license. My question is this, since in my experience I found the advanced class examination to be harder than the extra, why don't we grandfather the advanced class license holders to extra class?
This is a question that has come up many times before, and it's an area that the Commission has wrestled with. And where the Commission came out on it was that grandfathering of people to a higher class license would be unfair to those that have qualified for that license. Now, the advanced class license has not been issued in a number of years, and you are correct that many people did find that to be a more difficult exam at the time. Since then, the question pools have been revised, new questions have been added, there have been changes to the extra class pools involving the technology, kinds of communications that are used. There's certainly the exams cover regulations, and those have changed a little bit too. Grandfathering someone to a higher class basically says you're exempt from the examination. So what we would really be saying is the examination you may have passed 10, 15, 20 years ago is okay for the higher class privileges. And then the question is, well, why isn't it okay for everyone else? So where the Commission has come out on it is that if you're an advanced class licensee passing a 50-question exam, I believe it's 50 questions on the amateur extra class privileges, is a reasonable a reasonable examination for the additional privileges that you get. With the study guides, the materials, the online testing that's available, it's not difficult to prepare for it. And as a personal matter for you, it's probably not a bad idea to do a refresher course. You may have passed your advanced class exam in the 60s or in the 70s, and since then you've had no contact with the examination system. So there's certainly no movement on that part, on the Commission's part, to grandfather people. And actually, looking at the number of advanced class licensees, it's been going down quite significantly because people are upgrading to extra class exams. Okay, any questions on enforcement activities?
Thank you. I'm Dave Proper, K2DP from St. Louis, Missouri, and my question is involving enforcement where the offending station is outside the limits of the United States, yet interferes with communications ongoing within the United States. What type of cooperation can we address perhaps with Canada, Mexico, some areas in South America? And this is not just 14275. When the conditions come back, 10 meters will be suffering from the same thing. Thank you.
Sure. No, I understand. And what happens is if you have a complaint regarding the operation of a station by a foreign national, you let me know, and then what I do is I give you the contact information for my counterpart in whatever agency that is. Then you file your complaint with both me and that person so that we both understand that the complaint is pending. We do have fairly good relationships with all of the counterparts that do this type of work in other countries. So there is a dialogue. Whether or not they're successful, I mean, obviously our jurisdiction is limited to U.S. licensees.
Yeah, could you tell me how much internal review?
Could you let us have your name and call sign so we can decide if you need a new call sign?
Neil Ormos, N-I-N-L. Could you tell me how much internal review is required before a notice of apparent liability is issued?
Sure. A warning letter comes directly from me with review by the other legal advisors, generally speaking. A notice of apparent liability goes through a bureau review. It means I will send it from me to if I'm doing it. Now, if it's being done by the field, I think the same thing happens, and Jim can confirm this, but I will draft it up, send it to my supervisor, which is Mike Moffitt, who's the regional director, and then Mike will approve, if he approves of the substance of it, and send it through the Bureau for review. And that will go through the Bureau legal advisor and then the Bureau chief, Chris Monteith, and then out the door. Jim, is that correct for the field as well for you? Yes. So it doesn't go past the Bureau chief, though.
My name is Jim Anselmo, WB8NNJ. I'm also the officer of the Scioto Valley Amateur Radio Club, one of the 5 officers. We had an amateur move in from California. We're in Southern Ohio about a month ago, and we sponsor 5 machines. And we started getting complaints after about 2 days of profanity, talking about sexual prowess with ladies of all ages. We actually got an OO. Our control operators weren't taking him off. So we sent him a registered letter explaining to him that we no longer welcomed his activities on our machines. He is screaming bloody and murder that we didn't have the right to do that, and we can't deny him the use of the machines, and all kind of fun stuff. So I guess what are our options? You know, it's a private club. We don't want to close them repeaters because down in Southern Ohio there's not many machines, and we cover pretty much from Columbus to the river. So kind of any ideas?
Well, I mean, obviously, as a control operator and the trustee, you have a responsibility to maintain the integrity of your repeater. You also have the right, if you wish, to tell people they cannot use it. If you tell him that in writing, you know, you've satisfied your obligation.
We sent him a registered letter. We do have the copy back, but he's really griping.
We'd be happy to file it with the commission, and we can take a look at it. But realistically, if you have told him not to use it, it's your repeater.
Okay, we've told him if in 6 months we'll reconsider but we want to make sure. We actually I've never seen so many mad people in my life, and that club's been there 50 years.
Would you like to come visit my office? I can give you all that.
You know, no, that's an interesting question, and it comes up quite frequently with repeaters. When the repeater rules were written many years ago, one of the things the commission was asked to do was to specifically put in the rules authority to limit stations to using the repeater. And in section 97.205, where we have the rules on repeaters, it says limiting the repeaters to certain users is allowed. That certainly is a way that you can control a repeater, and it doesn't matter what the station is, the licensee is responsible for it. So whoever, it's either the club trustee or if it's an individual that has the license on the repeater, we certainly can contact them because of what's going on with one of the users. We can also contact the user. But you do have an absolute obligation to control that machine. And if it means limiting the use to certain users, the commission rules provide for that. And I'm not surprised, particularly when someone gets a notice that says, we don't want you to use the machine anymore. They may not be too happy. One of the common misunderstandings is that amateur repeaters are not common carrier systems. There is no duty to serve on a non-discriminatory basis. If you want to limit it to people in the DX club, that's fine. If you want to limit it to rush hour messages are going to be traffic related or the mobiles get priority, that's fine. You all put the repeater up, it's yours to run and your obligation to control it. And limiting it is allowed. So we will certainly do that. If the guy continues, I'm not sure what you're going to do it other than maybe turning off the repeater or knocking down a remote receive site if he's coming in that way or something. But the licensee has to control that machine. Okay,
yeah, Ed Collins, N8NUY. I'm a senior trustee for the Dayton Club here. We are trying to formulate rules for the D-Star digital repeater we're putting in. This is going to have 128 kilobaud access to the internet. Has the commission started any thought into what the limitations would be of internet over amateur radio, content of the internet we can transmit, etc.?
No, you're putting up the system. There's no special rules that apply to repeaters. It's the standard rules of the state, standard rules that apply in Part 97. If you're providing internet to the access or internet access, you're generally getting into the area of third-party communications. If it's coming in as voice over internet protocol, it's a third-party issue. The rules in 97.119 apply to that, but we're not going to have rules for systems. We never have. We have the rules for the station, and the station licensee will have to make sure that that station the system is designed, the station is operating as any station should. I mean, it doesn't matter whether it's a repeater or your own station at home, it's a station. You got to follow the rules. The gentleman in the back with the clipboard.
Good afternoon. Both of you have thankless jobs. I hope they're paying you $1 bazillion, but I doubt it. I wonder if you could define for me a pecuniary interest of public service employees during exercises and drills, such as hospital people, deputy sheriffs, etc.
I think we answered that in the talk earlier as no communications on behalf of employers. Next question.
Steve Andre, WB8WSF. You were just talking about what's allowed, or the question from, I guess, the N8 station about rules and regs. Does that mean, for example, that it is okay and the FCC will not hinder, say, MP3 music traffic over that repeater? The digital world opens up a whole new, it's a hornet's nest in terms of what can you do or what can you not do. I would argue that the MP3 file, as transmitted across the repeater, is not music. It is simply bits when sequenced properly turn into music.
We'll let you be the test case.
Thanks. I'm frequently a test case for things. But seriously, this is something that the commission needs to think about because there are all these rules. What if I use SSH? That is the encrypted protocol for communicating from one computer to another.
The problem is when these new technologies do come out, the commission does not do things on a across the board in enforcement on across-the-board basis. It's fact-driven. It's to a specific situation. So, again, I can't say yes or no what we would or wouldn't do until that circumstance comes before us. So, unfortunately, I was joking, but I really wasn't. Somebody will be the test case and set down the policy and procedures for that.
Hi, Chip Fetro, N4QFW. To follow up on that, specifically SSH, it becomes encrypted communications, and that's not allowed. The other thing is that, say you go to Google and you're looking for something, could be an address or something, but on those pages on the internet, over on the right-hand side, there are ads, and advertising is not allowed. And very often at the top, the first few are ones that are placed at the top because those people paid to be at the top. It's advertising. So the point is a lot broader. The problem is a lot broader once you connect to the internet, because you have to strip all that stuff out. And you can't allow encrypted communications. Yes, it has nothing to do with the system, but it does have to do with what's allowed elsewhere in the rules.
I love it when someone asks a question and tell us what's not allowed because they just answered their own question. The rule does not use encrypted communications at all. And there's no mention of encryption of communications in Part 97. The rule talks about, it's 97.113A4, music using a phone emission except as specifically provided elsewhere in this section, and that section applies to the International Space Station because they send a wake-up song to the astronauts, whom I'm sure are thrilled to be woken up by 2 meters. Communications intended to facilitate a criminal act and messages encoded for the purpose of obscuring their meaning, except as otherwise provided herein. Is the purpose for obscuring the meaning? That's a factual question. And it really means you got to get in the head of the person transmitting the message. And that's where they get to chat with Laura. And at that point, their head's usually spinning so fast, they don't know what they were thinking. Now, as far as the repeater goes, let me ask you this. Who put the system up? Does it matter? Ed. How does it matter? The licensee of the station, the licensee or the trustee, the club, some entity has decided we're going to put up a repeater and we're going to put these functions on it. It's the time, we're going to put an auto patch on it, we're going to put on these different features available to the users and things like that. The Commission hasn't told you to do that. We haven't asked you to do it. The rules that were written here were written long before SHBP 2457, whatever it was, came up this week. You don't find mention in here of Olivia or WinLink or, any of these other systems that you all have come up with. The rules are written for a standard. And if that standard needs to be changed, we need to know what it is you want for the new standard. My crystal ball fell off the desk years ago. And I'm not a digital guy, and I'm not one of these out there, engineers that, comes up with the neatest, greatest, and slickest way to compact data bits and send them at the speed of light through water. So if you have, something that the rules are out of date, they're not serving your purposes, tell us. We'll put it out for comment. If we need special rules for data communications being used over internet coming through repeaters, hopefully you all know what you want, because that's how the rulemaking process works. You ask us for a change of a rule, you tell us what you want the rule to be, we put out for comment, we get back lots of comments, and hopefully there's some kind of consensus of agreement as to what you want. Because remember, these are your frequencies. They aren't ours. When we're talking to the field offices and we're talking to other government agencies and we're laughing about the stupid stuff some of you do, it isn't on the ham bands. It's on government bands. So if this is a thing about some particular technology or, some kind of, encryption or accommodation or something you need, The petition for rulemaking process is the way to handle that. So everyone has input and everyone can say, yeah, this is how we want our frequencies used. Okay, I think we have time for one more question. Over there in the New York baseball cap, new call sign coming up.
Yep. Not a coincidence. Good afternoon, Bill. Good afternoon, Laura. You said to call you Laura. I'm Rich Gelber, K2WR from New York City, and welcome to our peculiar corner of the universe. As I'm sure many have told you, you've got a tough act to follow, and if you've gone over the recent and maybe not so recent enforcement cases with your esteemed predecessor, you're familiar with enforcement cases regarding certain truck stops and other establishments selling 11-meter radios that turn out to be 10-meter radios. My recollection is that that the most prominent case was settled with a consent order and a fine. My question is, I was going to get to the question. My question is, to your knowledge, are these people generally in compliance now? And if we happen randomly to find that they're not, do you want to hear about it?
Well, first, let me talk to your references to Riley. Riley and I are actually in regular contact, so I do hear from him quite often. He comes by. He lives less than 5 minutes from the office. He comes by and we chat. If I get a call from somebody and I look him up and I have a 6-inch file, I call him and say, Riley, come here and tell me about this guy. And he does. He left me an entire wall of files, by the way, not just one or two. There's actually a wall of files. We had 10 years in the job, so there are quite a number of files. So I have the opportunity to look people up, both complainants and subjects, by the way, when people come in, to make sure that the complaints are legitimate. With respect to the CBs, yes, I do have a file on that one. It is in my files. We do get a lot of complaints about the equipment, and we do want to hear about it. The problem is, it's very labor intensive to go out and to investigate these things from the Commission's standpoint. And to be honest with you, we only have a limited number of resources. So and that's right, you did put your arms out and save the amateur community, and that is correct. We do get a lot of information and a lot of assistance from the amateurs. The field agents will tell you that they appreciate all the hard work that the amateurs put into helping them on these types of cases. Please do let us know. Please don't be offended if we have to pick and choose the serious bad actors from among these people, simply because there are so many of them that, to be quite honest, I could write fines 24 hours a day when it comes to that kind of stuff and still not get them all done. So we will pick the worst of the bad actors to go after, but please do let us know.
Is it legal to shove a stick pin into their car?
Legal from the FCC's perspective or legal from your local PD's perspective?
Works really well.
Well, you know what? I don't want to know about it. I'll write you a card when you're in jail for a trespass, but,
It's an old trick for handling tough guys.
We have one more question over here.
I had told Laura one of the unique things about Dayton is you have an opportunity to see no evil, hear no evil, and be with evil. Okay, our last question, the gentleman here.
Mark WBNQZB. I read in a ham magazine that you were considering getting a ham license at some point. Just wondered what your plans are for that.
Sure. Actually, that allows me to introduce another member of my family, which a lot of people have now learned about. My father-in-law is Richard Smith. He's the former chief of the Field Operations Bureau. The Field Operations Bureau is the precursor to the Enforcement Bureau. So in my family, not only do I have a cop on one side, but I have an FCC cop, if you will, on the other side. When Dick started his career at the FCC, he worked in the LA field office as an engineer. One of the duties that he had while he was out there was to administer the amateur radio test. His expertise just so happened to be in the code. He is an incredible operator, and so when I decided to take this job, I did not want to run out and get my license before I took the job for a lot of reasons, not the least of which is I felt it would be a sham. I wasn't an amateur before I took the job. I didn't want you to think that I was selling you so short that I was going to run out and get my license to try and validate myself for this industry. Instead, I said, well, I would wait and take the exam later and become an amateur as I got to know the community. By the way, I'm not so sure I want to be part of the community anymore. But in any event, when I told the story to Dick and said, I was thinking about getting my license, he said to me, you will not get your license until you can pass the code part of the test. Unfortunately, he followed that up with a caveat, which was, and I will be there to oversee the administration of this to determine whether or not you are competent and qualified to be an amateur. So I have to learn code. I obviously do not know it. Dick is going to begin teaching me and my 6-year-old code this summer. We're anticipating she will be much further along than I by the end of the summer. But as soon as I do get competent in it, and as soon as I can get Dick to come, then the two of us will come. And I've challenged him to retake the test. He gave up his license when he became the chief of the Field Operations Bureau. And so we'll see which one of us passes and which one of us fails.
For those of you that are concerned, I made sure she went by the Vibroplex booth. And we also stopped by the Bengali booth. So she's gotten to see what the minimum requirements are for proper CW. With that, thank you very much for coming. We are going to continue Laura's introduction to ham radio by scooting over to the DX forum so she can see some of the travel pictures and some of the other places, and I can see if there's anyone there from K5D. Thank you very much for coming. We hope to see you next year.